At some point, the trying became automatic. You stopped expecting it to work. This video is about why nothing has and what does. There's a specific kind of tired that anxiety produces, not sleepy, not even exhausted in the way that rest fixes. It's the tired of having managed something every single day for a long time, of waking up and immediately taking inventory. How bad is it today? What's coming? What do I need to get through? Of carrying a weight that other people don't seem to be carrying and not fully understanding why it's yours. If you know that feeling, this is for you. Not because you're beyond help, because you're exactly the person this works for. Someone who has tried enough things to know what doesn't reach it and is ready to understand what does. Here's the thing about your nervous system that changes how you see all of this. It wasn't designed for peace. It was designed for survival. A system designed for peace would default to calm. It would activate occasionally when something genuinely dangerous appeared and then return to rest. That's not what you have. What you have is a system that defaults to vigilance and has to be convinced through direct, repeated experience that rest is safe. That's not a malfunction. That's the factory setting. Which means the question was never what's wrong with you. The question is what your nervous system has experienced, because that's what it's been learning from. Every day, across years, it has been taking in information about the world and adjusting its calibration accordingly. And somewhere along the way, through circumstances that made sense, through things that happened, through an environment that asked a lot of you for a long time, it calibrated toward a level of alertness that no longer matches what your life actually requires. That's the whole problem. Not a broken system, calibrated to a threat level that no longer exists the way it did. And here's what that means. It can recalibrate because it learned this level of alertness from experience, and experience is the one thing you can actually change. Before the solution, this needs to be said clearly, because if you've tried things and they didn't work, there's probably a story you've been telling yourself about what that means. Breathing exercises work. Journaling works. Meditation works. Talking to someone works. The research behind all of them is real. But here's what they have in common. They work at the level of the symptom. They reduce the feeling of anxiety in the moment, sometimes significantly. What they don't do on their own is change the calibration of the system producing it. A smoke alarm going off in an empty room. You can take out the battery. Silence returns, but if the alarm is wired to detect smaller and smaller amounts of smoke, if the sensitivity itself is the problem, taking out the battery doesn't rewire it. Tomorrow, it goes off again. The techniques were taking out the battery. What you actually need is different. You need to rewire the sensitivity, and that happens at a different level entirely, through rhythm, through exposure, and through something most people have never been told about, called completion. Your nervous system runs on a biological clock. Cortisol, the hormone most associated with alertness and stress response, follows a precise daily rhythm, peaking shortly after waking, declining across the day, dropping toward evening to allow sleep. That rhythm is partly internal and partly driven by environmental signals, primarily light. When that rhythm is stable and predictable, your nervous system has a sense of orientation. It knows where it is in the day. It knows when alertness is appropriate and when recovery is allowed. That sense of predictability at a biological level reduces baseline threat detection. When the rhythm is disrupted, inconsistent sleep times, immediate bright screen exposure at night, no natural light in the morning, the system loses that orientation, and a disoriented nervous system defaults to higher alertness. Not because anything is wrong, because unpredictability itself is a signal worth monitoring. This is why rhythm comes first, Not because it's the most dramatic intervention, it isn't, but because without it, everything else is harder. You're trying to calm a system that is continuously receiving signals that the environment is unpredictable. In practice, this means three things: a consistent wake time, including weekends, not to be rigid, but because your nervous system uses that anchor to set the rest of its timing. Morning light exposure within 30 minutes of waking, outside if possible, near a window if not, which locks in the cortisol peak at the right time and begins the day's rhythm on schedule. And a genuine transition point in the evening, not a perfect wind-down routine, just a signal that the day is ending and activation is no longer required. Lower light, slower pace, something that isn't new information. None of this is dramatic, but it is foundational. You're not treating anxiety with these things. You're creating the conditions in which the nervous system can actually receive what comes next. The nervous system updates its threat calibration through one mechanism only: encountering something it has learned to treat as dangerous, staying present through the discomfort, and experiencing that the discomfort passes. Not preparing for the thing mentally, not processing it afterwards, actually encountering it and coming through. This is what the breathing exercises and journaling couldn't do. They could reduce the discomfort. They couldn't produce the experience of passing through it. That experience is the data the system has been missing, not the logical knowledge that something is fine, the lived, physical, undeniable evidence that this activated me, I stayed, it passed, I'm okay. Every time that happens, the system adjusts slightly. The sensitivity recalibrates toward accuracy. The threshold rises a little. Things that were triggering a full alarm start triggering a smaller response. This doesn't require dramatic confrontations with your fears. It requires finding the smallest version of what activates you and tolerating it long enough to notice the activations settle. The email you've been avoiding, the uncertainty you've been trying to resolve, the discomfort you've been interrupting with your phone. Not forcing yourself through it, not white-knuckling, just staying present slightly longer than you have been, letting the wave build and pass without reaching for something to make it stop. That slight extension is the whole intervention. Done repeatedly over weeks, it changes the calibration more durably than anything that works on the feeling from the outside. One important thing: when you first stop reaching for relief, the discomfort increases temporarily. This is expected. The system is looking for the signal that the threat has passed, the check, the reassurance, the avoidance, and the signal isn't coming. That increase is not evidence that something is going wrong. It's the recalibration beginning. Stay with it. The settling that follows is the data. This is the piece almost nobody talks about. Stress responses are designed to complete. In the environment your nervous system was built for, a threat appeared, the body responded, heart rate up, muscles engaged, full activation, and then something happened. You ran, or you fought, or the threat passed. The physical response discharged, the cycle completed, the system recovered. Modern anxiety almost never completes. The threat is abstract, a difficult conversation, an uncertain outcome, a future that hasn't arrived yet. The body still activates fully, the same way it always has, but there's nowhere to direct it. No running, no fighting, no physical resolution. So the activation circulates. The stress hormones that were released to fuel a response stay in the system because the response never came. That circulating activation is part of what keeps the baseline elevated. The system is still, in some sense, waiting for the resolution that never came. Physical movement completes the cycle, not as exercise, not as discipline, as a signal. A walk after a hard conversation, movement after a period of sustained tension, enough physical activity for the body to metabolize what the stress response released. This doesn't need to be intense or prolonged. It needs to be sufficient to discharge what accumulated. The nervous system receives the signal. The threat has passed. The body did what it needed to do. It's over. Recovery can begin. Combined with rhythm and exposure, completion creates a system that isn't just being calmed at the surface, it's being given what it actually needed to process and move through what it was carrying. What this looks like. In practice, across a day, this is simple. Wake at the same time, get light in your eyes within the first 30 minutes. Don't hand your nervous system something to react to immediately. Give it 10 minutes to orient first. Find one thing during the day you've been avoiding or managing and move towards it instead. The smallest version. Stay with the discomfort long enough to feel it settle.